Right now, there's a piece of church growth advice that I think is secretly sabotaging churches everywhere. And sadly, it's kind of spreading like wildfire. Most pastors don't even realize that they've bought into it. In this video, I'm going to expose exactly what that church advice is and why it backfires in most cases, and what churches like yours can do to reach more people and grow the right way. I want to give you 5 smooth stones, and they're kind of 5 stones of how small churches in some ways actually have an advantage. You have limited time, limited resources, limited staff, limited facilities, all kinds of limitations that maybe you feel like are keeping you or are barriers from your church getting to that next level. Well, that's been most of my pastoral experience as well. And here's the advice that I received, and maybe you've received too, that I've actually found has been more counterproductive than helpful to me. And that is, look at whatever the megachurch down the road is doing and copy them. Now, I know it kind of makes sense on the surface. We should probably look to those that have had success and gone before us and just do the same things that they're doing. And to some degree, it does work. I love learning from the leaders of some of the largest churches in the country. I love reading their books. But in the end, if we just look at their churches and what they're actually doing there, we're probably not set up to do the same things that they're doing. I can't tell you how many times as the founder of Reach Right, where we help churches do church marketing and church websites, how often people come to me and say, I love what Elevation is doing. We want to do something more like them. Or I love the way that Michael Todd and Transformation Church do their social media. We should just do exactly what they do. Listen, the reality is you are not Transformation Church. You are not Elevation Church. You are in a specific assignment in your city, and it has to be tailored for what you're doing in your community there. I liken it to the story of David and Goliath. When David first rises to the occasion and says he's going to challenge Goliath, he's offered Saul's armor, and he looks at it and says, I'm too small for that. I can't use those things. And that's the same kind of response that we should have when we think about how we run our small to medium-sized churches when we take a look at maybe larger churches that are around us here. And what did David do? Instead, he picked up 5 smooth stones. And I believe if you're going to steward your small to medium-sized church well, these are the things you really need to lean into instead of copying what the megachurch down the road does. And to start, stone number 1 is authentic identity. You need to own your armor, own the assignment that God has put you in. Listen, when you stop impersonating megachurches and actually own who you are, people will find you much more relatable. And what I would encourage you to do as part of owning your armor is really leaning into what makes your community, your local area unique. I pastor here in a small suburb of Honolulu called Hawaii Kai. There's about 30 or 40,000 people that live here, and most of the people that live in Hawaii Kai really have an identity with our community. If I were to look to megachurches and take my cues from them, I would be missing a huge opportunity to relate specifically to the people of my community. Here, what matters in our community are things like education, and there's lots of struggle with addiction, and there's people that are struggling with mental health issues, and those are some of the things that we can uniquely target that maybe a megachurch wouldn't be speaking to. Because we know what's happening in our community, it makes us better able to reach our community. Owning your church's identity is vitally important, and when you own your identity, that's when relationships start to get sticky, and that brings us to our second stone. Relationship is your superpower. One thing that all megachurches generally struggle with is their ability to keep people connected. People a lot of times go to a large church because they want to have that feeling of anonymity, and that's just something that is very hard to accomplish at a small church where everybody knows your name. If you're a church under 100 or 200 people, when someone comes to your church for the first time, you'll probably know that that's their first time. You need to lean into this and train your people to do the exact same thing. Be really intentional about remembering names and stories, and make sure you have a really great visitor follow-up process. In fact, I'd actually even pivot to a visitor follow-through process where someone personally from the leadership of your church would reach out to everybody who comes for the first time. I would take the time to do handwritten cards and really lean into that. In fact, I have a whole system that we built at our church that I invite you to steal. You can use the emails and text messages and everything. I made a whole video about it. You can watch that right here. The reality is these kinds of relationships, while they're possible, it's small to medium-sized churches, they're next to impossible at larger churches. I have a friend of mine who goes to a very large church of about 7,000 people. He's been serving there and giving faithfully and been a leader of life groups for over a decade now. And he found out just a few months ago that the pastor of the church still doesn't know his name. That can't happen at a church of 200 people. And if that's the size church that you find yourself in, you need to lean into that and make relationships the key. And that brings us to stone number 3, which is sustainable simplicity. Do fewer things better. Let's face it, larger churches will always be able to offer more ministries than smaller churches. But what we can do is offer a few ministries and do our best to make them very strong. If you're a church of 100 people, you will not be able to have a dynamic men's and women's ministries and world-class youth group and age groups for every age of child in your children's ministry and recovery groups and divorce care groups and Financial Peace University and all of the things that you see a very large church offer. Maybe you'll be tempted to say, we need to do all of that so that we can grow our church. No, you just can't let yourself go there. Here's the remedy: is you need to make sure you offer a few things and do them very well. And I would start by taking a look at your community. What are those needs that you have there? For my church, like I mentioned before, we decided to really lean into mental health situations. So my medium-sized church actually is launching a counseling center where we have a licensed counselor on our staff who's able to offer free counseling services to people that are a part of our church, and even counseling services to people that are part of our community for a very nominal fee. Now, is that something that every small church should do? No, I'm not saying that at all. Chances are your church shouldn't do that because it's a really big undertaking. But because we're very specific with the things that we offer at our medium-sized church, and we saw a major need here, we decided to put a lot of our eggs into that basket, and it makes sense for us. What is that need that you have that you can really lean into and do 1 or 2 things really well, as opposed to doing 40 things in a mediocre way? And here's the reason why it matters, is because when we focus, it creates margin. And in the margin, well, that's where shepherding actually lives, which brings us to stone number 4, which is pastoral presence. Lead like a shepherd, not like a showrunner. Let's face it, I have worked with megachurches before, and there are a lot of people required to operate the entire production that happens each and every week. And then don't even get me started on Christmas and Easter and all of the effort that goes into those whole seasons. And I'm not knocking it. I think that they serve a unique purpose and they're leading so many people to Jesus. But for most of us, our assignment is not to be a showrunner or a production manager. It's to be a shepherd. And that's what we need to lean into. As a pastor or a leader at a small to medium-sized church, you can be involved with a lot of the actual shepherding that happens in your church. Now, I will caution you, I think you should delegate some of these shepherding responsibilities within your church very quickly, because most people can't shepherd and lead more than 40 or 50 people by themselves, I would say. But you can do that to some degree. You can be there to do hospital visits and do weddings and funerals and be there when babies are born and do baby dedications yourself. And when you do that, you actually model it for the people of your church. Let's face it, people stay connected to churches where they have relationship. And one of the primary ways that relationships are forged is in times of tragedy, transition, and all of those pastoral moments that are so important in the life of all churches. It is absolutely easier to get shepherding right at a small church than it is at a mega church. And we need to lean into that and make sure we have systems in place that allow us to continue to do that no matter what. Let me let you in on a little secret. At my church, our staff, I require everybody to spend 100% of their coffee budget every single year. And we try to increase everybody's coffee budget every year as well. We found that the $15 that one of our staff members would take someone out to coffee with is some of the best money we can possibly spend as a church. It builds real relationship, it helps people stay connected, and it helps people take that next step in their discipleship process and grow closer to the Lord. And the 5th stone is probably the most important one, and that's to have courageous faith and to prune with purpose. I've been around the block enough to know in ministry that it's actually easier to start ministries than it is to close ministries down. And it's not easy to start ministries, don't get me wrong, but it is so hard to take something that just isn't working anymore and have the courage to say, we probably need to stop this and put all of our attention into something else. Because here's what's gonna happen inevitably, is that someone's gonna say, well, Joe, he gave his life to the Lord because of this ministry 9 years ago, so we can't cancel it. It's so important to him. Well, maybe it is still valuable, but you have to do that honest assessment. Are the best days of this ministry behind it, or is it something that is still thriving and producing fruit today? If your church is going to specialize in a few things, that's probably going to mean you have to prune some of the things that are no longer yielding fruit the way that they used to. And that will rub some people the wrong way. You can't just do it without talking to people, but have the courage to do it, talk to people about why, and then steer your church forward into the opportunities that will have the most impact going forward. Listen, Pastor, let me say this to you. You do not need louder lights. You really need louder love. Don't chase after someone else's armor. Use the 5 stones that God put in your hand. He gave you this assignment as the pastor of a small church. I know it, and he gave the same assignment to me. If God's put you in an assignment to lead a small to medium-sized church, well, you're in good company. The vast majority of churches in the United States are small to medium-sized. I'm in one, chances are you're in one, and that can be our superpower. And if you're on the smaller end of the scale, maybe under 100 people, I actually did a video recently about how I would grow a church from 50 to 200 people in 1 year if I was just starting over. But you definitely want to watch this video next. I think it'll really help you out.